The phone vibrated just as the straps were lowering the casket. The screen flashed white, then went dark. An unknown number, a short message, cut clean like a paper knife. Mom, I'm alive. Don't trust Owen. Check the owl's left eye. I am Nora Baxter, 72, a retired court stenographer. I squeezed the chain around my neck until my nails dug into my skin. On the chain was a silver owl brooch, my mother's heirloom, which I had made into a pendant. The owl stared back with green glass eyes, like two little traffic lights stuck on go. In the front row, Owen, the widower, didn't move. His tie was as perfectly knotted as a seal on an envelope. His voice was as steady as a court record. He had no idea my world had just cracked open with a completely different sound. I straightened my back, the way I used to in the courtroom when the judge entered. Without looking down, I ran my thumb over the owl's left eye. There was a barely perceptible chip in the glass. Cassie had dropped the brooch on the kitchen tile, back when she was studying to be an engineer. My nail found a tiny seam I'd never noticed in all these years. I twisted the little glass eye, and it lifted up like the lid of a music box. Beneath it was a memory card, thin as an eyelash. Cassie's old habit of hiding everything in symbols hadn't died with her, if she had died at all. The choir was mournfully singing something about fate. The air smelled of lilies and damp coats. I stepped into the side aisle, pretending to look for a tissue. In the visitor's restroom, I bolted the lock, pulled out the card, and slid it into the old push-button brick of a phone I still carry for emergencies. The screen lit up with numbers as if someone had just opened a vault. Property records, coordinates, charts of money moving between nonprofits, scans of documents declaring homes unsafe. In a separate folder, a short note in Cassie's font. If I disappear, go to R. Vega. Don't trust anyone from Owen's department. I returned to my seat. After the service, Owen hugged me carefully. His palm touched my shoulder blade, and I felt his fingers pause for a fraction of a second, right where the chain rested. He said, "Cassie would want us to be strong." I said what was expected. His eyes remained dry. That night, at home, I received a second message. Motel by the water tower. 9:30 p.m. Room 17. Come alone. I went. The road split the night in two. Wet asphalt below, a starless sky above. The motel smelled of bleach and fried onions. In room 17, a single lamp cast a yellow glow. I knocked. Two short, one long, our old hiking code. The chain rattled. The door opened. I was looking at the same amber eyes, only deeper. Cassie, thinner, a scratch on her cheek. Alive. I didn't scream. I just exhaled, the way you do when you can finally say the word yes. We held each other. Then she pulled away, pointed to the owl on my chest, and gave a tired smile. "Mom," she whispered, without voice. "We can't speak out loud. Sit down. Listen." And I sat, just as I would in court, hands empty, head full. And so, this was my reality. My only daughter, alive. My son-in-law, a shadow on the wall, and our city, a chessboard of sold-off homes. At stake wasn't just her life. It was my own old age, my memory, and my symbol. The owl, watching with two glass eyes, one of which held a secret too dangerous to speak. At night, a motel breathes like an old archive. All drafts, creaking steps, and whispering pipes. Cassie explained everything dryly, the way you write a memo when your future is hidden between the lines. She worked with the county's maps, roads, utilities, property lines. She'd noticed ghost neighborhoods, areas where homes were suddenly hit with fines for faulty balconies or mold, even though no inspectors had ever visited. The pattern was always the same. An elderly or single-parent family would get letters, the fines would pile up, and soon the house would be auctioned off for back taxes. The buyer was always the same, a group called the Neighborhood Foundation, run by a woman named Rose Hart, and overseeing the projects was Owen. Cassie tried to raise alarms through his department. Her emails got lost. Then her car was accidentally hit on a bridge. That night, a man came to her hospital room with a folder, mentioning my name as her emergency contact in case of death. The next morning, a body was wheeled out under a sheet. The ID tag had her name on it. As the orderly was distracted, she saw someone swap the tags. She slipped out a service door and ran. "Someone gave me a chance," Cassie said quietly. "Maybe someone who realized the scheme had gone too far." The memory card in the owl held everything: addresses, dates, inspection logs. On one scan, a handwritten note, "The Watcher." It was a name used in emails for someone who connects the dots, assigning tasks, delaying requests, approving condemnations. The Watcher knew who was vulnerable. Our only ally was R. Vega, Reina Vega, an investigator from the DA's office. A year ago, she'd left me her card saying, "Call me if the paperwork ever feels wrong." She'd used a strange phrase I liked: "Call me if the paper crunches." Now, this paper wasn't crunching. It was screaming. We made a plan: new phones, secondhand clothes, and the owl worn deep under my sweater. I copied down 10 keywords in my old self-taught shorthand. I barely slept. I kept thinking about the whispers I used to hear in the courthouse about a watcher, a clerk who supposedly knew everything. The next morning, I called Vega. No names, just, "The paper is crunching. I have maps. We need to meet outside." The reply came by text: "Under the highway overpass by the river. 2:10 p.m. Alone." I went alone. Cassie stayed in the college reading room, a place full of cameras, but even more people. Under the overpass, the air smelled of rust and damp earth. Reina Vega appeared quietly. She stood beside me, not looking at me directly. A dance of avoidance, common for those who might be watched. I laid 3 printouts on the concrete barrier. She looked at them, and her jaw tightened. It was a gesture I'd seen prosecutors make when they found a lie in a testimony. "2 guys in my planning department suddenly started wearing expensive watches," she said. "Emails are disappearing. I'm working with just one person in the state capitol. Keep that owl close to your skin." I asked about the Watcher. She shivered, as if from a sudden chill. "That's what they call whoever holds the keys to the registries and schedules. It's not a person, it's a list of verbs: postpone, sign, return, expedite." We arranged for a dead drop, a locker in an abandoned art school. I knew just the one. Back on the street, we bought stale bread and yesterday's newspaper. There was an article about Rose Hart's foundation, bringing a smile back to the city. I remembered her smile, flawless and perfectly empty. Later, we stashed copies of the files in the lost locker, under a staircase that still smelled faintly of watercolor paint. We left another set with an old mailman named Ben, who understood that paper can cast a very long shadow. That evening, I reviewed the files again: a complaint from a neighbor, an inspector's report signed by someone who was on vacation, an auction for certified participants only. Rose buys through the foundation, money flows through a church, and Owen signs off on the social impact report. I could hear the chain locking into place. This wasn't going to be a rebellion. It was going to require discipline. My entire career was about discipline. Listening, recording, and adding nothing of my own until it was time to speak. We would no longer run. We would build our own courtroom right in the middle of their noise. In the files, Cassie had found mentions of the shipping dock, the pipe, and night work. I found a name I recognized, Lizzie Delaney, a clerk in the property office. I remembered her from my courthouse days. She loved peppermint candies and wore a small pin on her lapel. A little owl, my symbol. Was it their joke or their pride? During the day, we split up. Cassie worked in the digital world, covering our tracks. I went back to the world of paper. At the county administration building, I stood in line and watched the board listing recent property auctions. I saw Lizzie Delaney, the owl pin on her lapel flashed green. I ordered copies of some public records, paying in cash. As I left, I felt a tail, not directly, but like a shadow that doesn't belong. A white pickup truck on the corner had its engine off. It just sat there. I ducked into a pharmacy, then a thrift store, then a diner where the smell of fried food is stronger than justice. I watched the street in the reflection of a soda machine. The truck was still there. That night, Cassie layered the data. The neighbor complaints were all clicked from the same 2 IP addresses, both near the foundation's office. The security camera footage of their inspections had identical black spots where tree shadows should have been. The footage had been altered. They edit the darkness, Cassie said, but the shadow of the edit remains. The next day, I went back to the administration building to request the file of a deceased woman whose house was on their list. The clerk told me, "You'll need Lizzie's permission." I smiled like a grandmother asking for a cookie recipe. Lizzie's eyes followed me like a cat watching a laser pointer. "Why do you need this?" she asked softly. "For Sunday school," I replied, a lie that smelled of vanilla. She nodded, but the owl pin on her coat seemed to glint. It was an exact copy of mine, only its eyes were yellow. An owl knows an owl. That night, the fire department showed up at our apartment. A carbon monoxide alarm went off. I showed them my handheld gas detector. They were good men, but they were sent by someone who had our new address. The watcher was listening. We packed a bag. I put the owl on under my sweater and felt its cold metal circle against my skin. Symbols don't guarantee anything, but they give you a direction. The turning point came where people feel most comfortable. The city was holding a partner appreciation night. We put on volunteer t-shirts and old badges. No one checks faces when there's free salmon and mini cupcakes. On stage was Rose Hart, her voice as smooth as her dress. Backstage, there were boxes for a silent auction. I found a folder marked Neighborhood Foundation, Confidential. Into a pocket inside, I slipped a tiny audio recorder, the size of an ice cube. Not to catch dirt, but to catch the rhythm of power. In the hall, Owen moved between tables, smiling with his eyes. He sat down next to a man with narrow shoulders who leaned in and said something I could just make out over the noise. "Tonight, the pipe at the South Cove?" Owen nodded. The South Cove. That was near the old docks. When the auction closed, I swapped the foundation's folder with one containing a gift certificate for a haircut. On our way out, a man in a plain jacket looked at my owl pendant, which had slipped out from my collar. "Nice pin, Mrs. Baxter," he said, as if talking about the weather. He wasn't supposed to know my name. "It's old," I replied. Someone was getting nervous. That night, we went to the cove. The wind off the water was stubborn and salty. At 11:30, a plain van pulled up, then another with a Pipes and Pumps logo. 4 figures emerged from the shadows. I recognized Owen's walk. Cassie touched my wrist, the signal to start recording. They spoke in clipped sentences. More words about water, pipes, and pumps than about homes, families, or residents. I heard a tall man in a jacket say, "The watcher is pleased." Owen replied, "It will all be gone by sunrise." At dawn, I called Vega. "I have a recording. South Cove, the pipe, tonight." She sighed into the phone. The sound was like tired metal. She would gather who she could, she said. But half the department isn't mine anymore. We both knew what that meant. From here on, there were no right moves, only less wrong ones. By midweek, we were being pulled into a vortex. An electrician randomly showed up at my old house, asking for me by my maiden name. The library security guard warned me that someone from the foundation had been asking about the camera logs. We became ghosts. At night, we heard the sound of our lock being picked, a new, perfectly oiled sound. We slipped out a service exit. In the back alley stood 2 men, one with a hammer tattoo on his neck. We didn't run. We walked toward the one place where people actively ignore trouble, the supermarket parking lot. Back at our library hideout, I opened the folder we'd taken. Inside were meeting minutes about which houses to target next. In the margins, a note. Watcher. Okay. The handwriting was neat, feminine. Roses, Lizzie's. It was time to fight with paper. I went to the clerk's office and filed a lis pendens, a notice of a pending lawsuit, on 42 properties from their list, alleging procedural violations. I knew it would eventually be rejected. But for now, it would jam their gears. It would slow them down. That night, Cassie disappeared for 40 minutes. A text came from her old work number. Meeting, college, urgent. She messaged me from another phone. Not me. Don't go. I went anyway. I sat on a bench across from the college. In the reflection of the bus shelter glass, I saw the white pickup. A boy of about 16 sat down next to me. "Lady," he said quietly, chewing his gum, "you should probably go that way." I realized then, the enemy moves on the scent of fear. We decided to set the meeting ourselves. I called Owen. I used the voice of a woman who has already been written off. "I'm tired, Owen. I don't want a war. I have what you're looking for. Come alone." He agreed. His voice was steady, but the slight pause before he said, "Please," gave away the tension. The diner smelled of cinnamon. Owen arrived wearing a light sweater I knew was too thin for the weather. He sat where he could watch the doors. I sat where I could watch him. "We can fix this, Nora," he said. I watched his hands. They never used to tremble. Now, his index fingers twitched. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside weren't files, but old family photos. "So you remember the price of a person," I said. Then I saw it, something I had blocked from my memory. Years ago, Owen had asked me to notarize a stack of documents for a grant application. He said it was urgent. I trusted him. I didn't read everything. I stamped them with my seal. Now, on Cassie's memory card, I could see it. My notary seal, on the Foundation's very first pilot projects. I was the loose thread they had pulled to unravel a whole neighborhood. I was the hole in the net. I looked Owen in the eye. "I made you possible," I said, my voice low, "and I will fix it." He blinked faster than he should. Outside the window, the white pickup slid past. Owen didn't turn his head. And that's when he whispered, "You don't understand, Nora. They're not here for me." For the first time, I heard real fear in his voice. "Don't take this to the Cove," he said, pronouncing the name of the place like a terminal diagnosis. I got a text from Cassie. "They got me. South Cove. Don't be a hero." I underlined that last part with my thumbnail. I went to the clerk's office one last time and filed a formal complaint, attaching lists, photos of the doctored shadows, and a copy of the Watcher OK memo. They had to log it. That meant for the next few days, anyone trying to push a sale through would hear the low grumble of the system. They hate that grumble. At the docks, I met Vega. She had 2 people with her. They had flashlights and faces that hadn't smiled in a long time. At 10:30, the trucks arrived. Leaning against a wall inside was Cassie, alive. Her hands were bound, and standing before her was Rose Hart, in a long coat, talking to a man everyone called the chaplain. Next to them, Lizzie Delaney clutched a folder. Rose turned her head. "Let's begin," she said. The climax of a story is like a heartbeat on a monitor. A sharp spike, then a fall. I stepped out of the shadows with the quiet dignity of a witness taking the stand. "Let my daughter go," I said calmly. "The rest is just paper." Rose smiled that same pastel smile from the photographs. "Mrs. Baxter," she said softly, "you've done so much for our city. Don't ruin it." From the left, Vega stepped forward. No sirens, no shouting. "Hands where I can see them," she said, in the slow, clear tone of a teacher giving a spelling test. But cornered people move fast. The chaplain reached for his pocket. A flashlight beam cut through the dark. Someone shouted. Then Owen appeared on the right. He held up his empty hands, looking at Rose. "Rosemary," he said quietly, "it's time." "You were always weak," she replied, and took a step back into the shadow of a large pipe. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Owen turned to me and gave a slight nod, a sign we used to use at family gatherings. He strode over to a truck and flipped on a floodlight. A single, sharp beam hit a cart, piled with documents. I saw the white pages gleam. I saw my own notary seal. "You can't leave without those," Owen said hoarsely to Rose, "and she has them." And in that moment, I understood. The first text message. It was a black trio. Cassie hid the card in the owl, and Owen gave her the code. Left eye. Because he knew about the old chip in the glass. He had been deflecting their first blow from me all along. Rose lunged for the folder in Lizzie's hands. But Lizzie, as if she'd been waiting for this, didn't give it to Rose. She threw it sideways into the water. The papers scattered like white fish. In the chaos, Owen ran to Cassie and cut the ties on her wrists. For a second, I didn't see a corrupt official. I saw a man who had finally chosen a home over a foundation. And then the chaplain fired. Not at me, not at Vega. At Owen. He fell slowly, not like in the movies. I caught his eye as he went down. He tried to smile, but the air wouldn't hold it. The sounds dissolved. Rose was screaming. Vega had her team move in. Lizzie stood, with her fists clenched, tears mixing with the sudden rain. He helped us in the end. It was a late kindness, like an early autumn. But it was there. Vega helped me up. "You did your part," she said. "Now it's ours." The courts like to drag things out. The newspapers like to simplify. And small towns like to talk. It turned out the Watcher wasn't one person. The system was watching itself, through clerks who got used to stamping forms without reading, through notaries like me who found it convenient to trust familiar faces, and through volunteers for whom a person's home was a project, not a life. That was the real twist. Not one villain, but a legion of tired hands that had stopped paying attention. We buried Owen quietly. I left a small white note on his grave with 3 words. Too late, but yes. The 42 lawsuits froze their operation. 4 homes were returned to their owners. The newspapers were restrained, but the story was told. My name was barely in it, and that was right. We were the margins of the page, not the headlines. At home, I put the owl away in a box. Sometimes I take it out and hold it. The silver is cold now. The symbol points somewhere past me. That is its power. It gives a direction, not an answer. Cassie now works for an independent public data advocacy office, and I lead a workshop at the library. How to read documents with your eyes, not with your hope. I tell them that a signature isn't a yes to a person, it's an I have checked. That a notary isn't a rubber stamp, they are a human being. The lesson? Don't confuse the system with a conscience. The system is a tool, like my old stenograph machine. It types what it's told. Conscience is a metronome. It keeps ticking, even when the music all around you is wrong. And if, on your darkest day, you get a message that says, I'm alive, don't trust anyone, check the owl's left eye. Don't dismiss it as the madness of grief. Check it, open it, record it. The final chords aren't loud, but they're true. When you keep that metronome ticking inside,